Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another webinar with us. I'm Ariana. You probably have seen me before, of course, but I'm going to be the host again for tonight's webinar. And today we have joining us Austin, the CEO of Mantis. So, Austin, why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about yourself to start off the webinar tonight?
Awesome. So my name is Austin Allgaier, CEO of Mantis, part of the founding team of Mantis. I'm not the smart guy behind. We have a lot of really smart people here, but our mission here at Mantis is to help every shooter at every level improve. So we were founded 8 years ago on this. Not enough people have the adequate training that can help them accelerate their shooting to the level they want it to be at. And though all of us in the 2A community are passionate about the Second Amendment right to bear arms and to carry, we don't talk often enough about the responsibility that's in conjunction with that right. We realize we really have a responsibility to be adequately trained, properly trained, so that we can be prepared for the situations, heaven forbid, where we need to exercise that Second Amendment right. So that's where we're at. We make firearms training systems. So at our core, we are focused on creating tools that shooters can use to improve more rapidly than they could without those tools. So if you are stuck in a gap on the field of your fire towards improving your shooting, you get one of our systems that will help accelerate your training and help you get to where you want to be proficiency-wise. So we're a small company based in Illinois. We're growing every year, putting out lots of new products. It's exciting stuff. Everything we put out there, we eat our own dog food first. So we build our products first for our stuff that we would use, that we want to use. And of course, a ton of other people in the world need and use our systems too. So that's what we're all about, is helping people improve their shooting.
It's perfect. I'm like newer into the shooting community. So a lot of the events I've gone to, y'all have been there at, and I've been able to use your systems. That's how we like kind of all came together. But every time I've used y'all's system, I've improved with my shooting, definitely. So it's great to have, especially from like a newer shooter perspective. But thank you all for joining and watching tonight's webinar. Remember, we'll have the Q&A portion at the end, so make sure to leave any questions you have in the comment section, whether you're from Facebook or YouTube. But we'll get started on talking about tonight's topic from here, I guess.
Awesome.
So we can start from like a training perspective, and then just like the responsibilities of new or experienced gun ownership.
Yeah, so it's a great question. You're a new gun owner. I'm curious to know tell me a little bit more about your history. Like, when did you get into guns in terms of gun ownership, and why did you decide to do that?
So my family, they've always we kind of like have gone to the shooting ranges here and there growing up, but honestly, this job got me more into gun ownership. And I've worked here for a little over 2 years now, and that's kind of increased my gun ownership and my love for going out to the range in general. And it took me forever to even get my first gun, and this company kind of gave me my first gun too, but I just got one at the end of last year, and I've just started using that one because I was like, what do I even want my first gun to be? Do I want it to be bigger? Do I want it smaller, concealed carry, or just having in my car or my home, wherever it is? So that's just kind of like my history of it. And I love going to the shooting ranges. I'm still very new, and I'm not the best at shooting, which is why I go training more often and need to go training more often. But that's just kind of like how it started for me.
So what gun do you prefer? What's your carry gun or your preferred range gun?
I have a Glock 43X, and before I got this one, I wasn't really the biggest Glock fan. I liked Glocks, but I always had a little bit I just had better shooting with SIG or with other gun models. And Glock, I've grown to love more, especially the one I have now, because it's smaller, it's more compact, and it's easier to learn with as a newer shooter. For me, at least personally. Even the Glock 19 is a great one, and there's not much recoil with it. It's a little bit heavier compared to the 43X, I think, but it's still a great gun.
Okay, interesting. So you bring up a great point in terms of you go to the range a lot to get better, to train up your skills. And the funny thing, not funny, that's an incorrect adjective. The interesting thing about shooting is that it's not like riding a bike. It is a skill, it is acquired, but it's a perishable skill. A lot of people think, oh, I've been shooting my whole life, like I should be good. And the question is, well, when was the last time you went shooting? And if it's been months or a year, a couple of years in the case of a lot of people, that skill has perished to a point where it needs a fair bit of honing. So again, part of our shtick is trying to make it easier for people to train more regularly, because if you don't train regularly, your skills just fall flat. And so that's a
Yeah.
key thing. When you talk about you as a new gun owner, even someone who's owned guns for 30 or 40 years, if we're not training regularly uh, in the actual situation where we need it, we will not be proficient. So train if that's with a Mantis system or going to the range, or using our system at the range, or using something else, like just be active, be training, because I think that's step number one towards exercising our rights and our responsibilities as being competent and well trained with a firearm.
Yep,
Now,
I agree.
I'm curious to know, you go to a range, do you use an instructor at the range when you're shooting? Do you just shoot by yourself and try to diagnose your own issues, or what's your how do you improve when you go shooting?
Honestly, they shoot and self-diagnose.
Okay.
So like of course I have like some other people with me that are well more in tuned with their shooting capabilities and what they need to improve on and how to improve certain things compared to me. And they kind of like help me through that process as well. But the only time I actually started getting like more like immediate feedback is using the Mantis system and knowing exactly what I'm doing wrong, so then I can improve from there. So honestly, I've gone the lazy route of doing self-diagnosing, and
Well,
which isn't great.
well, that's what we all do, right? That's all we had was self diagnostics.
Yeah.
And so we do it the best we can with what we have, and that's how we've always trained for hundreds of years, since guns were part of our ownership, part of our society.
Yep.
Um, do you feel, you said there's people there with a lot of experience? Do you feel intimidated at all at the range?
Um,
Being a newer gun owner, do you feel like out of place at all? Do you feel like
Not anymore. In the beginning, I did. I felt very out of place. I felt almost a little uncomfortable if I was by myself. When I had
okay,
other people with me that were well knowledged and using like being at the shooting range in general and even handling the gun in general, I was comfortable. But just like even I get like the pre jitters before I'm about to shoot, I like hesitate a little bit because wasn't I just wasn't as familiar with having a gun and just like training it. So it was a little bit more intimidating then, but now it's not intimidating and I feel comfortable to even go by myself because I understand the weapon and it's not an intimidating item to me at all anymore, which it's more like it's just like a fun hobby in a way now, but it's also beneficial for me to know because I can use it in self-defense situations as well in the future if I need to. So it's just like win-win.
so were you more intimidated by the use of the firearm, or by the people at the range, or
That's a
like,
good point. I think maybe both.
okay,
So mainly just the use of the firearm because I wasn't very aware of how to use it. Like I knew how it worked, but I wasn't just like fully an understanding of it. But also the people at the range too, just because some of them are very quick and they have a gun right next to me, and I'm like, I don't even know how to use mine properly. Like, what if they do something wrong? And then so that was a little intimidating. But it was mainly just me and knowing like I need to knowledge myself in this, like, and
right,
that would make me kind of like shaky in a way.
right, okay. That's great. That's great feedback, and it's not uncommon for even experienced shooters, right? We feel there's a lot of self consciousness and fear of the unknown, particularly with new shooters as well. You don't know what you don't know. So
Yeah.
now I'm curious to know safety concerns. Do you have any concerns when you're first going about safety, and were you well versed in the four rules of safety, or did someone teach you? How did safety come into your firearms um, growth or experience?
Yep. So my very first time at a range, I think I was at an indoor range, and they kind of like give you like a quick safety course. But there was this one outdoor range I went to, and they had you watch this entire video on safety and the four basic rules of firearm safety. And like, you must follow these or else you're getting kicked out, basically. And I feel like that instilled it just like from the start. And then, of course, working here and like me having to learn certain things, and that also helped like reinforce it there.
Okay, good. So I guess that's one thing to reemphasize. Obviously, whenever we're training, This is just for everyone watching the 4 basic rules of firearm safety. Of course, treat all firearms as if they're loaded.
Yep.
Keep it pointed down range.
Yep.
Don't put it anything you don't intend to destroy, basically. Keep your
Yep.
finger off the trigger until you're ready to fire, and then know your target, what's beyond it. So,
Yep.
and that applies to not just live fire, but dry fire as well. That's something we always got to be cognizant of. There's people that make mistakes at home. They think they're dry firing. They don't need to pay attention to those 4 rules of safety. But the reality is they apply just as much at home, if not more, because you have a different mindset. So make sure if you're training at home or at the range, you're reviewing every time those 4 rules of safety, and you're cognizant of those. So you've been in the firearm space for a little while. Did you have any experiences where, I guess, did you take any instruction beyond that initial course of kind of basic safety stuff, or was it all self-taught? Did anyone show you the ropes in terms of like how to grip a gun, how to pull the trigger, how to line it up, and if there's a malfunction, here's what you do, and here's not what to do? Or again, was that self-taught, YouTube videos, instructor? Tell me about that.
A little bit of everything, honestly. So from my learning and how I learn, I feel like this is like everyone's different in a situation, how they learn and grasp situations. But I have to read something and then I have to do it and explain it myself to understand like 100% fully and be confident in what I'm doing. So that's kind of what I did. So like I would read about it and then I would go do it. And then I would have people, even at the company that I work for here, because we would go to the shooting ranges all together, or just like friends that are really great at their firearm training to help me and fully understand like what I'm doing, how I'm supposed to really hold something, or how I'm supposed to like even just simply load the magazine. Like it's just all those pieces for us. So I would do it myself, and then I would just like learn from there, from action as well. And then self-diagnosing too, of course, because we all do that.
That's right. Again, that's all we have to go off of, is self-diagnosing. And I guess you went to the range, you go to the range, primary purpose is to train and get better. Do you do any dry fire practice at home, or do you do pretty much exclusively live fire practice at the range?
Live fire practice. The only time I've done dry fire practice is with y'all's system, and like from going to events and seeing y'all, I just like pass by. I'm like, I need to use y'all's system. I just need to buy the system already, but I finally have my own gun now. So now it's time to make that next step so then I can do that at home. But yeah, mainly just at the shooting ranges.
Well, and again, that's not uncommon because that's what we've been doing for hundreds of years. Is the only way to train theoretically is to put some bullets down range, right? And it's more just recently in the last couple decades when dry fire has kind of become a thing, in terms of, hey, this is an option. This is what you should consider doing. But there's a lot of concerns in dry fire. For those that just to make it clear, dry fire is training at home or training anywhere, but without live ammunition. So you can still prep the gun, get it positioned, take some shots without ammunition. So hammer's going to fall, striker's going to fall, and you can self-diagnose something, right? And that's been the big gap. I think a lot of people have heard of dry fire, but a lot of people don't dry fire because they're kind of like, well, that's it. Like I just cycle the slide, I aim at something, I pull the trigger. Like that's boring. So they feel like it's a boring experience. They feel like it's not helping them get any better. And frankly, they're not incorrect. And the reality is dry fire can be very boring, and it can also build up bad habits if you can't diagnose what's going on. The live fire, you can see where the bullets are going on target. Now there's a lot of factors that could influence, your correct or false diagnostics. But in dry fire, you don't really know. Now the pros know. I would say that the pros, all professional shooters, do 80 to 90% of their practice dry fire and about 10% to 20% live fire. These are guys that get free ammo too. But they still do the majority of their practice dry fire. And you're like, if you had all the free ammo in the world, would you spend time dry firing? And probably most people would say no, but these guys do it. And the question is, why would they do it? And it's because they figured out that it is very effective for isolating certain skill sets in a very convenient way, because there's still an inconvenience of having to go to a range and allocate that time. Whereas, like, let's say you're at home and you got kids in bed, like you can't leave them and go to the range. Like, how do you stay sharp? And so this is a way that they can stay sharp. Now they're much better at self-diagnosing than you or I. but dry fire is still a fundamental piece of their regimen. So for anyone watching, if you're not a believer in dry fire, talk to any professional shooter, and they will tell you that it is the cat's meow to rapid improvement.
Yeah.
So my goal today is to convince Ariana to do more dry fire practice at home.
Let's see the end result. You succeed in this goal. You probably will, because I'm already convinced.
Right, but like you said, one of the problems with dry fire is that it's hard to diagnose yourself. It's hard to know exactly what you're doing, exactly to know what to focus on to improve, and that's where one of our systems comes in is to give you that feedback. So I guess I think we're all in agreement about rights and responsibilities and training and safety. I guess the question I'm curious to know, when you go to the range, do you have to train, do you have a specific regimen or routine that you follow?
Kind of, but it's also just very like how I'm feeling when I get there. So now, knowing, like, I'm like trying to think of, like, whenever I first started, I would just be, let me just get comfortable with the gun, and then let me just like shoot, and I would be very slow. Like it would be like maybe 30 seconds between each round. Like I would take a while to shoot each round. But now I've gone to the point where let me speed it up, and then let me try like close range first, and then I would go like further and a little bit further depending on my grouping and how that's looking. And then if my grouping isn't doing good, then I would try to figure out, well, if my grouping is over here, maybe I need to adjust this and my hand placement here. Maybe I'm just a little shaky. Maybe I just need like a second to step back and practice something else. But it's really just like, I don't really go in with a set plan, which I probably should start to in the future. But it's just more or less just me going in, knowing I need to practice just going faster, and then just seeing my grouping and how I need to adjust there. Because I always had a difficulty like just not shooting each round fast enough. I would just take forever because I would just be like, I was just newer. So it was very intimidating then. But now that's like kind of like where I've been headed.
Right. Okay. Well, good. So what Mantis does, and I'll do a quick demo. And again, this is not a sales pitch for Mantis stuff. This is just to help people understand that they can dry fire at home. You can do it with Mantis or without Mantis. But just want to show you, you wanted to review a few key fundamentals about how to shoot.
Yep.
And so again, for anyone who's a new shooter or even experienced shooter, it's good to have a review for fundamentals to make sure that there's nothing awry there. Again, we train and work with hundreds of thousands of people a year, and we see stuff all over the gambit. And this is no criticism of anybody. It's just, it's always good to have a refresher, no matter how much and no matter how good you are. So a quick refresher on some basics about fundamentals, grip, trigger, and sight alignment, just kind of put things in some context. So I have here, and of course we're following the 4 rules of safety, which, quick recap, is treat them as if they're loaded, keep the muzzle pointed away from you, don't aim it at anything you don't intend to destroy, keep your finger off the trigger until it's ready to fire, and then know your target and what's beyond it. So in this case, I have here, this is a CO2 gun, so it's not a real weapon, but I'm still going to treat it as if it's loaded, because habits are habits and they die hard. So you can see here, to make sure, you typically check the chamber, you drop the magazine. There's no magazine in this one. It's a CO2 pellet gun. But again, I want to make sure that there's nothing in there that it can't be utilized for any ill will. This is a SIG P226 replica. It's actually got a great weight and feel. There's the Mantis X10 on the end of the, in front of the trigger guard there on the rail. And fundamentals, how should you grip, hold, and as far as grip, trigger, and sights. So what we typically will say is, when you want to grip this gun, you want to position the beaver tail in the fleshy part of the hand first, so you can get a good solid grip. I'm trying to get the right camera angle here. It's not used to doing this on screen. You do it in person. But you put it right there so that it's as tight as possible. And what that does, the purpose of that, is to minimize movement during the shot process, as well as to enable you to do better recoil control. So with that there, that's the first point of contact. Then wrap these 3 fingers around the bottom, of course, to keep that finger off the trigger. So you're ready to shoot. Tight grip on there. You can see kind of positioning. My thumb is right here. The other hand is going to cinch around to kind of the fleshy part of the grip. If there's space there, you can cinch there. The 4 fingers wrap underneath it. And then a common grip is thumbs forward. Now, I will make a caveat as far as like what is proper or appropriate. There's some very common things. Ultimately, you want to do something that is safe and something that is effective. So there are people that have different grips, different styles. You want to focus on something that is safe first and foremost, and something that is effective. So you don't want to have your thumb here behind the slide because that'll get chopped with a recoil. There are some people you'll see them do like a cross thumb grip like that because they're used to. They might do some revolver shooting as well and want to have a consistent grip between revolver and semi-auto. Lena Michalek, who's the best female 3-gun shooter in the world, she actually grips it and she puts 2 fingers up here. It's kind of like a sloth grip, and you see her shooting. You're like, why? That's so wrong. I was told to grip it like this and put thumbs forward. And why does she have 2 fingers right there? Well, I think it's the right of any world champion to decide how they grip a gun, and she's found a grip that's safe and effective for her. So it's a more stable grip, more stable platform for her. So be careful. Again, this is how I do it. This is a very common way to grip the gun. But anyone who says there is only one way is missing out on an opportunity to collect and use and improve based off of data. So, and that's what I would say is that with all the stuff we talk about with firearms, Mantis is ultimately about giving you good data to make decisions, so that no longer do you have a subjective decision about what's better or best or good or bad. You just use the data. The data tells you. There's no dog in the fight. There's no strong emotions. It's just, does the data say this is better or not? So most common grip that works very effectively is this one. Now, having said that, now once you're ready to shoot, again, making sure that I'm aimed in a safe direction, aware of my target and surroundings, and then I present it out. Now grip-wise, and I'm sitting down so you're not going to see the full, everything in terms of stance and whatnot. But grip-wise, again, lots of varying opinions in terms of like, do you want to push, have a kind of a push-pull, how hard do you grip the gun sideways, this type of and there's lots of different factors. Some people say 60-40, some people say 100-100. Again, not saying one's right or wrong or better or best. It also depends on the person. Some people, when they grip really hard, it's very, very stable. Some people, when they grip that same, say it's 100-100, their gun is shaky because they're pressing so hard. So again, look at the data, see what the data tells you, and use that to inform your decisions about how hard you grip the gun and in which direction. Now, the whole point of the grip is to keep that gun stable through the shot process. So aiming the gun is the easy part. You have, see if I can get an accurate picture here. You have the rear sights, and you have the front sight. And in this case, there's no optic on here, but you're going to line up that front sight in between the rear sight, evenly spaced. So it's kind of like a castle. And so you're going to see equal white space between, assuming that your sights are aligned properly on the firearm. And then you're going to place that front sight on the target, and your focus is going to be on the front sight. A lot of people, if you focus down range, you want to obviously be aware of their surroundings. There's some differences of opinion on where your focal point should be. I'm not going to get into, again, debating different stuff, but that's where you want to place your front sight is on the target, having lined up your 3 sights and on target, and you're good to go. Now, again, the point of the grip is to keep the gun stable through the shot process, because what happens is it's easy to sight the gun to put it on target. Now, what happens is when we pull that trigger, a little bit of movement happens. So it's easy to aim it, and we're like, I'm aiming on the center of the target, but whenever I pull that trigger, the bullet goes somewhere else. That's what Mantis systems are designed to help you diagnose. And ultimately what happens is when you pull that trigger, you put a little bit of force on the gun that makes it move in a certain direction. And that little bit of force, again, just a small angle of movement can have big ultimate impact on where the bullet goes on target. So the grip is meant to counteract a lot of that trigger pull movement. Now, it doesn't counteract it all, because sometimes the body doesn't anticipate certain movements. Sometimes it anticipates the recoil and does a preemptive movement to that. But ultimately, you want to have a firm, strong grip to help keep it stable, so that the little bit of trigger pull won't cause too much of an issue. So once you got the grip strong, present on target, aim strong, then you'll just do, again, trying to get this in frame a little bit while I'm still aimed in a safe direction. A smooth trigger press to the back. We're not going for speed at all here. And this is a CO2 gun, so you hear a little bit of a pop there. But just a slow trigger pull. It should, again, when we're starting out, we want it to be kind of surprised by when that happens, because we don't want to anticipate the shot and do some preemptive movement to counteract that, so to speak. So that's the gist of how you want to do it. Now, some people talk about jerking the trigger or slapping the trigger, yanking it really hard. When you're just going for precision shots, you don't want to pull it very quickly. If you're going for high-speed shooting, obviously you're going to shoot a lot faster, and you're going to be pulling that trigger a lot faster. You want to have a good feel for where that let me turn off the CO2 so it's not quite as noisy. A good feel for where that break is, and then when you let it out, that little bit of a reset. So you didn't hear that because I was talking, but you'll hear, see if you can hear the break and then the reset in just a minute. Could you hear that?
Yep, I could hear it.
You can hear the reset. So
yep.
This trigger has a long trigger press and a long reset, but you can't pull that next shot until the reset happens. So you got to wait till the reset is, and then you can pull it back again. But dry fire practice is at its core practicing those fundamentals, making sure that you got a good solid grip, good solid presentation, good solid smooth trigger press to the rear, feeling that reset and follow-up shots. Obviously, this is a double action, so I'm not racking a slide in between shots, but that puts you in a good position to practice those core fundamentals of what you do. Now, the diagnostic piece is the next piece, but any questions so far on that before it's kind of a 5-minute monologue, but any questions on that, Ariana? Or are you good?
I'm good so far. I was going to check to see if I don't think we had any in the comments really pop up for that, but you laid that out beautifully. So
it's a great
no
question
questions on my part.
Yeah. So I'll answer a few questions here. Because it's related to what we've been talking about. Mm-hmm. Obviously, some people talking about how dry fire has changed their shooting, and of course, there's some endorsements for our Laser Academy system, Mantis system, Blackberry system. Bill the Killer Pug, does it simulate recoil? No dry fire system gives that kind of feedback. So, Bill, I assume that's your actual first name. That's a great question. No, our systems don't simulate recoil. And they do that intentionally. First of all, there's a major cost addition. If you're trying to simulate recoil, you'd have to pay a lot more for a system that does that. The other reason is that we fear the recoil and we anticipate the recoil and make mistakes because of that. But the reality is what affects the bullet going to where the gun is aimed is first and foremost based off of your aiming position and your trigger control. The recoil event doesn't happen until after the bullet's left the barrel, and then the gases cause that recoil event to occur. So the recoil doesn't occur at all till the bullet's already gone, and it doesn't influence the path of that bullet. So yes, we should train live fire. Always have some training in live fire in your life. So you work with the recoil, but all of the stuff that determines where that bullet goes is pre-recoil. And in fact, if we can train ourselves to not fear the recoil, to not even think about recoil by extensive dry fire practice, and just focus on that pre-fire, hey, accuracy, without that background voice in our head saying, fear the recoil, fear the recoil, fear the recoil. That's why a lot of pro shooters, why all the pro shooters, and why a lot of the best shooters in the world really focus on dry fire, because they train essentially without that fear of recoil. Now, then they go to the range, live fire, and they have to deal with that recoil at some point, but all their trigger control and their core mechanics are solid enough and locked in muscle memory such that they're not really influenced as negatively by recoil. Now, even the best shooters in the world can sometimes anticipate recoil, and it is something we need to be aware of, but ultimately trigger control is all about pre-recoil movement. Question about the SIG P320 X5 Legion with an X300 light. So if you have a flashlight, how do you mount it? So this mounts on the rail, slides on and off and on. This is a Mantis X10 unit like we talked about. Quick and easy detach. There's a little lever in the front. You pull that down, slide it on. You're good to go. If you have a light or laser or something else in the way, or a firearm without an accessory rail on it, what do? We have a bunch of different adapters, some of which, I'm trying to figure out the right pose here, they actually mount on the base plate or replace the base plate on the bottom of the gun. So, and it actually mounts down there. Now, does it work the same? It works identically. So there's gyroscopes and accelerometers in here. It doesn't matter if it's mounted here or here. It works identically. So if you have a holster that doesn't work with the Mantis, or you have a light on there you want to keep on there, you mount it on the base plate of the firearm.
It's a good option.
How does Jerry Mitchellette grip a firearm? He grips it very tightly, and he grips it like I showed you. So he grips it in the more common usage. All right. And that's all the questions related to what we're talking about now. So again, firearm safety is key in all of this. If you're dry firing at home, make sure you point it in a safe direction. That includes not just pointing at a wall. You got to think about what's beyond that wall. Is that a bedroom? Is it an outdoors? What's outdoors? What's in that other bedroom? Be as safe as possible, because those habits you ingrain in dry fire will carry over in an actual live fire scenario. Let's see. Now, the diagnostic piece. The range, you can see where your bullets go and where they don't go, where you hit, where you miss.
Right.
Diagnosing what caused that can be an issue sometimes. You don't know if it was your sighting, your sight alignment, your sight picture, the sights on the gun. Weather conditions can influence it, depending on what range you're shooting at. The ammunition you're using can influence that to a certain extent as well. So the question is, how do you diagnose yourself? And so I'm going to talk about, I'll give just a 2-minute demo on how the Mantis system helps you diagnose shooter errors. Ultimately, practice is more effective when you get feedback. You don't know if you're good, if you're bad, if it was due to, again, something you're doing to the gun, something on the gun itself, something about the overall thing that you're missing. So here's the X10. I'm just going to push that button to turn it on. Here's my phone. There's the app. There's the Mantis X app. I just hit the connect button. Now it's connected. I'm good to go. I'm just going to start with open training. Make sure I have my settings here set up properly. So working on a pistol, right-handed dry fire on my pistol. I'm going to do the open training drill. Again, sorry for the less effective drill. You can see there's a safety warning there, just to make sure that we're acting in a safe manner, even in dry fire. Hit OK. And now I come to hit. This is a key screen. We'll get to that in a minute. But let me show you what the Mantis system is doing. At its core, it's tracking the gun continuously through the entire shot process. Now what happens is when I take an actual shot, you might have heard the score. I'll turn that up a little bit. When I take an actual shot, it saves and analyzes the muzzle trace surrounding that shot. So let me take another one.
90.
So the blue is the movement during the aim and the hold. The yellow is the movement during the trigger press. The white X is where the shot broke, and the red is post-shot movement. You can change the window of time if you want to. Ultimately, that is awesome shot process.
41, 61, 62, 89, 87, 93, 71.
There's a bunch of shots I took. Everyone gets a score. You're like, what is the score? See how better. 100 is perfect. It's rarely gotten because it's very difficult to get that. The question is, what is a 40? What is a 70? What does that mean? Well, that's a measure of how much you move the gun, how much you deviate from your aiming position during the shot process, during the trigger press. Because again, like we talked about, when you aim that gun, that's the easy part. When you pull the trigger, that's when everything goes scawampus, goes haywire.
Mm-hmm.
You want to correct those issues. Mantis helps you diagnose what those issues are and how to correct them. So what it does, what we can see here in the muzzle trace, it tells a lot of information, but we distill this down for you. So what this shows today is my average score is a 77.5, and it's so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of my shots of the 10 shots that I took, I pulled to the left. So what that tells me is I have a consistent issue. If I was aimed on target, the shots would have been to the left had I been consistently aiming. And this shows me, hey, that's a consistent issue. That if I fix that, that'll drastically improve my entire shot process. So if you tap on this right here, the red section, it explains some possible causes of what could lead to that and then how to correct it. So trigger finger placement could be an issue for folks, depending on where it's placed on the trigger. It could pull it to the side while you're pulling the trigger. You could pull it to the left if there's too much, or to the right if there's too little, or depending on how much. If it's way too much, it could actually pull it the opposite way. So basically, it gives you a basis of consider that might positively influence your trigger control. And that is trigger finger placement causes a lot of that horizontal left and right movement. There are other factors as well, but that's a key thing. So knowing that, it gives you one thing to focus on rather than just like, hey, I'm pulling to the left. Okay, I'm going to aim to the right. Well, you don't want to compensate because in a real life situation, that's just not going to work. So we want to make sure that we're accurately diagnosing what the shoe's doing wrong. We correct that mechanic issue, and then all the other shoes kind of take care of themselves. So that's how we can diagnose stuff. We look at the movement patterns before, during, and after the shot. We get quantitative scoring on how good or bad it is, and then some qualitative analysis and feedback describing what a core possible cause for that mechanical deficiency could be. So that's a quick overview, very like simplistic snapshot or peek to how the system, which is drills and courses that add different layers of analysis and feedback, but that at its core is focusing on at least this particular. So I saw Bill asked a question about dry fire with the Mantis X, anything to protect the striker block. So there you go. So great question, Bill. I hope you're related to the guy that founded massive gun oil company, Poppies, and you receive a windfall from him. But the question is, does dry fire hurt your gun? And the recommendation is always call the manufacturer, because that's what we're supposed to do to verify. Most striker fired, most modern pistols are not an issue. Center fire is not a problem. Rim fire typically has or can be a potential problem. Call the manufacturer. Now the question is, what are they going to say? Most of them will say it's okay. However, in situations where there's any doubt, use a dummy round that has a little, rubber plug in the back you can hit. There's laser cartridge you can also do if you wanted it to hit that, protect it. But generally speaking, most manufacturers will say it's not going to ruin things any more than firing live ammunition would. And in fact, will do less damage. So obviously inspect your guns periodically for speed, for anything that might be back in striking. But dry fire, for the most part, is a safe and effective thing to do, and will not damage your firearm. Liz asked, do you have to cycle the slide for each shot? If you're doing dry fire with a single action gun like a Glock, yes. If it's double action like this, you can repeatedly pull the trigger without any issues. Obviously, revolvers, you wouldn't need to do anything, keep that trigger, but semi-autos you would have to for dry fire. Now there are CO2 guns. This is a great gun. That is a CO2 gun, and it's a good replica. It's like $130. For most common firearms, there's a great air gun replica. CO2 canisters in there. A little bit like this one has a little bit of recoil, a little bit of ping, and the trigger set with. It's a great training option at home that works great with Mantis as well. Works with air guns also, so that you don't have to cycle the slide in between shots, and it's a lot of fun too. While training with something that's actually a little bit safer, if there's any concern there. Great question by 30 Cal Crazy. Does a 90, 80, 70 score correspond to a circle size? Yes, that's a great question. The second part of the question was, is a 2-inch 10 yards? And that is absolutely 100% correct. For a pistol, for rifle, the scoring system is a little bit different. 90 on a pistol is about a 2-inch group at 10 yards. So the scoring system, I think, 90, that's like an A-. I want to get 100. Well, 100 is, like I said, virtually impossible. And a 2-inch group at 10 yards, like, take it, be happy, don't get greedy, call it good. And yeah, works. So an 80 would be a 4-inch group at 10 yards, and a 70 would be a 6-inch group at 10 yards. That's how the scoring system is based off of. Great question. Manny asks about the Blackbeard and the Blackbeard X. So this is the Mantis X10 system. We have a few different models within the X or the X series. We have another called the Mantis Blackbeard, which is a trigger reset system AR-15. So it replaces the bolt in the magazine of your existing AR-15, basically converts it into a training weapon. So whenever the hammer falls, leaves that hammer backward, it emits a laser out the front and turns your weapon into a training weapon, so you can practice clearing your house, practice target practice, height over bore, the offset, and your optic at close distance. A great training aid, but specifically for the AR-15. So that's for the weren't familiar. Somebody asked, can I upgrade it? Well, it's a two-piece system, one that replaces the bolt, one that replaces the Blackbeard X versus the Blackbeard. The only difference is the Blackbeard X has all these analytics and diagnostics in it, in addition to some new, really awesome dynamic shooting drills. And all you need to do is upgrade the magazine. So rather than to buy a whole system of a bolt and mag new, you can keep the old mag if you want to. Just buy a new mag, and it'll work with the existing Blackbeard system. We also have a trade-in program, so the old mag, you can trade that in and get a credit towards a new mag, $50 credit, which is a great value to our customers. Larry, been using for a couple months. How do you correct when you get different feedback on shots, but fundamentals on all shots seem the same? Watching the gun sights during the shot shows not movement. So it's hard to diagnose or to know what, without looking at your session specifically, Larry, to know what you're seeing. But one thing you could do, call our customer support team. You'll get guys that are based here in the U.S. Our whole team's here in the U.S. They'll be able to walk you through and help you understand differences. You're going to probably want to look at that muzzle trace screen to see where the discrepancies are. Okay, we see some other comments about all of that. So great questions and great feedback. Can I take a 10-second hiatus to grab a drink of water so I stop clearing my throat?
You're all good. You're all good.
You can tell them an interesting story about your second time at the range or something like that.
Yeah. Yep. Linda also, she just wanted to clarify that you said your question originally, you don't have to slide the gun for each shot with the regular gun for Mantis system. He can, Austin, whenever he gets back, he can 100% clarify it, but you don't have to slide every time. I know the audio kind of like kicks in and out, but he'll re-clarify that. But my first day at the range, my second day at the range, I think before he gets back, I'll just quickly talk, or he's back. But my second day at the range, I think, was my favorite because it was an outdoor range. And I like being outdoors because it's just like, I live in Texas, so our outdoors and our environment here, it's very up and down. But the shooting range that day, it was just beautiful. And then it was just the greenery, grass in the background. And that was very fun. And it's just, you don't have to smell all the gun dust, like all the dust and everything too, all the powder. So outdoor ranges, I really liked. That was a fun first experience.
That's awesome. We're in Illinois, and so we get an outdoor range about 4 months a year when it's not painful to go outside. So
yeah, I do not like the cold. Only if I have a whole bunch of layers on. That's the only time I will bear the cold, or if it's pretty and snowy out. But the snow here in Texas, it's just ice. It's not pretty at all. Maybe for a little bit, but then it just ices and it's just dirty and not safe.
Unfortunate.
It is. But I think you touched up on most of the questions. I don't know if there's any other ones that you wanted to finish touching up on. But
yeah, I think I got them all. I think I can jump back to the I guess the talking about training. One of the I asked you earlier, do you do anything consistently at the range, or do you have a routine or a regimen? We're talking about training. You know, if you talk about other sports, a lot of people are training for something. Like I'm training for a 5K, or I'm training for this sort of competition. There obviously is competitive shooting people train for. Mm-hmm. A lot of people are just training for the day-to-day confidence and competence in carrying a firearm. It is helpful to have goals along the way, to have some kind of benchmark or roadmap or something to work towards. And I will say we try to support and accommodate this in the app itself in Mantis. We get lots of different drills and stuff. Down at the bottom of the list, we actually have a bunch of courses you can take. So these courses, what they are is a series of different challenges and proficiency markers that walk through over a period of time to keep you dialed into and motivated to practice and train for something. And at the end of whenever you complete a course, we actually send you a patch in the mail for free, a Velcro patch. You can put on whatever you want to put Velcro patches on. And this is a kind of a reward for achieving that level of competency. So what you can use, again, something that we provide in terms of keeping you motivated towards an end goal, or just create your own goals. There's lots of other stuff online that work towards, but it's nice to have a goal rather than, because then we actually make progress towards something as opposed to just going and hoping that something positive happens.
Oh yeah, I agree. Having a goal sometimes holds you a little bit more accountable as well, so you can stay on track.
Yep, absolutely. So I've talked a ton. Just to kind of recap what what we started with and kind of bringing it full circle. The Second Amendment right is married to and inextricably linked to our responsibility. Every right has a responsibility, right? And I think the problem that we run into culturally is that everyone talks about the right to do this and the right to do that. And that's not just within the 2A community, it's with everything. There's lots of people screaming, I have the right to do this. And the question is, well, rights are only maintained through responsibility. And so for every right you want to exercise, you have to exercise the corresponding responsibility for that. And we couldn't beat home the message more that we got to be responsible in terms of how we train, in terms of how we prepare, in terms of how we use these tools that we have the rights to own. And that's what helps maintain our rights longer term, is by the consistent, responsible application of or administration or exhibition of those rights. So stay trained, stay proficient, be it with a Mantis system, be it with something else, and that will help maintain our rights through that responsible ownership for as long as possible.
Yeah,
so
that's what we want.
That's all I have on that. And you can take it away, and then we have some more Q&A to tackle.
Yes, perfect. But thank you for all this helpful information. You did a really fantastic job breaking down this topic and also making it engaging with having your demo of Mantis system. I know I learned a lot, and you definitely accomplished your goal on making sure like I'll start actually dry fire training, which will be, of course, with Mantis. But just so I can start training like that, so then I'll be able to improve my shooting fundamentals just in general. But definitely keeping this all in mind with learning. But if all of our viewers are looking to purchase a gun for training or self-defense or even for hunting, then that is great. Good for you. But that also means if you ever have to defend yourself with a firearm or any legal weapon in general, then whether that's like at home or out and about and something happens, then what typically happens after you protect yourself? You might have to go to trial to also defend yourself legally, which may cost a lot of money. So before we get started on the Q&A portion of the webinar, I'm going to quickly discuss what Firearms Legal Protection, why I'm even here, but what that is all about.
Firearms Legal Protection offers several different memberships to whoever is interested in signing up for legal protection. These plans are divided into individual plans and a family plan, which some benefits and pricing vary state by state. For the purposes of this webinar, we will look at our most common plans and benefits that are available in most states. The individual basic plan includes protection in your state of residence. It also includes uncapped payment of attorney fees for defense of criminal and civil cases. Firearms Legal Protection memberships also extend to all legal weapons, including non-lethal weapons. With the individual basic plan, you also have Defense of Extreme Risk Protection Orders, also known as red flag laws. All plans have access to the 24/7 emergency attorney answered hotline, so no matter a time an incident may occur, you can count on our hotline and an attorney will pick up for immediate attorney-client privileges. You also have access to the MyFLP mobile app and one of our recently added benefits, expungement of criminal record on non-conviction incidents. Members of all plans also receive access to digital content and special discounts. The next step up is the individual premium plan. This plan has nationwide coverage and also includes all the benefits just mentioned and payment of bail bond premium, payment of expert witness and investigator fees if either are needed in your case. There's also coordination of counseling support, payment of lost wages if you are out of work during trial, and a list of other benefits. We also have the family premium plan to choose from for those who want the same protection also applied to their family. For just a little bit more, you get all the benefits that were just mentioned applied to your spouse and all minor children. If you want more information over these benefits, then check out our Instagram or Facebook page for uploaded explained benefit videos. Remember, if you, friends, or family are not already protected by Firearms Legal Protection, please click the link below for a special discount we offer our webinar viewers. Now, let's get back to today's webinar.
All right. So with all that being said, we can start talking about the Q&A. We have some pre-submitted questions we can go through, and then I've seen a little bit of the questions come through also in the comments that you haven't addressed yet because they just started popping up. But I think it's only a couple, but we have the pre-submitted questions. So we'll just start there. So we have our first question, Alan. Do you have tips for correcting left, right, presumably finger pull?
Great question. So if a lot can be counteracted in the grip. So we talked in the demo I showed, trigger finger placement was one factor in that. The grip can also counteract a lot of that. And there are other factors. Stance could influence some of that. Sometimes as we fatigue, there can be some movement of the gun through the shot process. But bottom line is you can experiment with a lot of different things. The Mantis will tell you what helps improve it, what makes it worse, as you make different adjustments to, again, grip, trigger finger placement, trigger pull speed, trigger pressure, stance, etc. So, use some data and figure out what works out best for you based off of potential suggestions that are out there.
Great. Next question, Levante's question. Would you get more accurate results with the Mantis X10 Elite when at the range other than dry firing due to muzzle rise, grip, etc.?
Great question, Levante. The answer is it's the same results. So it doesn't matter if it's dry fire or live fire. We mentioned this early on. By the time the bullet's left the barrel, you can't control it anymore, and that's when the recoil event occurs. So bullet leaves, then the recoil happens. So the results are the same, dry fire versus live fire. Now, having said that, generally we see people, their scores in dry fire or scores in live fire are often worse than they are in dry fire, because they're anticipating the recoil, and so they might have some pre-shot anticipation that they're moving the gun in some direction. Levante also asked another question in the comments a couple times we didn't address, is that we have a system for a bullpup 5.56. We do not yet. So we have a long list of Blackbeard systems that we're building out for different platforms. The more we get requests for specific platforms, the higher on that list it goes. So thanks for your patience. We hope to have one for every gun. That'd be our mission.
Great. So you have Jim's question. How can I self-spot my rounds without the spotter feedback?
It's a great question. I assume he's talking about live fire. There are apps out there. We don't make one that do record your most recent hit on target, so you could consider downloading one of those apps to use that. The other thing that people do is they will use tape and tape up existing holes, and so they can see where the new bullet holes go. And sometimes if you don't want to use an app for that, some people just use video record what's happening, and so they can see the holes getting punched in the paper while they're shooting, and then they'll review that afterwards. So a few different options. Ultimately, the goal of being able to self-spot is being able to see how much the sights moved while you pulled the trigger and in which direction. So it doesn't matter. This can happen in dry fire as well as live fire. You want to acquire that ability to, when you're pulling the trigger, to be able to see that micro movement, of the front sight in between your rear sights while you're pulling the trigger. And if you can master that skill, that's what all competitive shooters have mastered that skill. And you just practice until you can start to see that happening. One thing that the Mantis system does help you do is it tells you, and so when you're dry firing with it, you pull a trigger, you make a shot, the system tells you what you did, and then you kind of learn, when it feels like this, that's what happens. So we can kind of connect the dots to help you learn that process of calling your own shots a little bit quicker.
Great. All right, next question. Carl's question, as a new shooter, do you recommend using the Mantis system before even going to the range?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. With one caveat, if you, again, we talked about grip and proper positioning, make sure you get that locked in. We don't teach you that in the app. You can watch videos on it, but make sure you get those fundamentals right. Would highly recommend taking just a basics class, 1 or 2 hours to show some basic fundamentals, make sure your stance and your grip, and make sure that, again, beating safety into your head like crazy. But absolutely, your first time to the range, there's some intimidation that can happen there, even if you're a repeat visitor, both in terms of how do I use my gun as well as what are the people around me going to think? Do I look like an idiot? If you can get a little bit more proficient before you go to the range, you're going to walk in with that much more confidence, which is going to make your practice session that much more effective. If you're paranoid about all these other thoughts, you can clear those out with dry fire practice ahead of time and go with a focused purpose to the range and have much better experience there.
I 100% agree. All right. We have another question. So Timothy's question, if you don't have a gun, but you still want to train using your system, where do you go for there?
Ooh, well, Timothy, I give you permission to buy a firearm.
You are granted.
Permission granted. Yeah, I hope you have a birthday coming up, or I hope your spouse has a birthday coming up and you could get a gun for your spouse. So great question. We have a lot of brick and mortar retailers, so a lot of gun stores that sell the Mantis products, and every one of them that sells it, we give them a demo unit that they can demo to their customers. So if they sell a Mantis system, you should be able to demo the system in store. And by the way, that's also a great way to figure out which gun to buy. Because you can look and you can see, this gun, my scores are lower. That must mean that I have a harder time controlling it through the shot process. So it might feel a certain way, but if you can control a gun a different way, because the grip might fit your hand better, the weight distribution might be a little bit more solid for your frame. Lots of factors. The Mantis can actually help you choose a gun as well as give you feedback on how well you're shooting before you buy a gun.
Makes sense. All right, Stephanie's question. Does your app track all the past history, or is there a limit on amount of storage that it holds?
Great question. Yes. To tracking all your past history. So it stores it all on your phone. If you want to create an account, it'll store it in the cloud too. And then you can port it between devices, view it online, all that kind of stuff. And the second question is no, there's no limit on the amount of storage it holds. The third question you did not ask is there any charge? And the answer is no. So the app is free. All the storage is free. We're not into subscriptions or nickel and diming you for stuff. You paid for the hardware. You're using it. We're happy.
That's great. All right, next question. John's question. What's your advice on starting kids off with firearm training?
Great question. So I have kids. I actually have 6 kids, variety of ages. When you say starting off, it depends on where in the phase. Obviously, starting off, start with safety. Before you even talk about shooting a gun, talk about safety. Talk about it over and over and over and over and over until it's drilled into their head. And then you start with just basic safety practice. So we're just going to pick up the gun, act safely with it, and follow the 4 rules of safety. And so that means they're going to look around, be aware of their surroundings. They're not going to aim at anything they don't intend to destroy. They're going to keep their finger off the trigger. So we're just practicing just gun handling. We're not even practicing trigger control, sight alignment, grip, any of that stuff. We're just practicing safe gun handling. So I would just beat that into them. Gently persuade them. We're not beating anyone. Gently persuade them to be safe and handle that gun in an appropriate manner until it's second nature. So where if they saw you doing something that might be potentially unsafe, they would be alerted to that fact. So it is surprising to me and sad. We go to a lot of shows, a lot of expos to demo the product. And so many people, we get muzzled all the time. We have demo guns like this, completely safe. But so many people, as they come up and they pick it up and they'll look down the barrel. They'll aim at somebody else just unawares. And safety. We got to do better, guys, with safety. We are fortunate that more bad things don't happen because of some negligence out there, but just be safe, know what those 4 rules are, and practice them religiously. So that's what I would do. And I wouldn't even put their finger on the trigger at all until it's completely ingrained in them. And then, of course, start them off with dry fire practice because that's going to be something that they'll be able to achieve a great level of proficiency without going to the range and being scared by the big bang. And depending on their size and caliber, this is something that they can graduate from there into then like a CO2 air pistol. This thing has a little bit of bang from the CO2, a little bit of noise, a little bit of recoil, shoots out a little tiny pellet if you want it to. It's a very innocuous introduction to what a live fire firearm feels like. And then you can step up from there to maybe a 22 or 9mm, depending on how old they are and how responsible they are. So start with safety, work into like the BB gun, air gun world, low caliber and higher caliber, but start with dry fire. And again, always emphasize safety in all of these categories.
Great tips. Okay. Smitty's question. What's your opinion on repetition versus quality?
Repetition versus quality. You need both. You need lots of quality reps. So now, having said that, quality over repetition. So if you're repeating a bad habit, that just takes longer to get rid of. We really want to get those good habits ingrained from the beginning. And in fact, if you get quality reps in, you minimize how much shooting you actually have to do. We collected data on 100 million shots analyzed. We said, okay, how many shots, how many reps do you have to get to a certain level? And what we found is that after about 1,000 reps of dry fire practice, the proficiency level drastically improves. So only 1,000 shots with good feedback makes a monumental amount of difference. Again, this is using the Mantis system, which is faster than not using any system at all. But it's because they're all quality reps. If you think about how much money you can blow on ammunition before you get a solid level of proficiency, it's a lot. So 1,000 reps basically puts someone from a, call it an 8-inch group at 10 yards to about a 3-inch group at 10 yards using the Mantis system. And these are dry fire reps, and then the live fire results speak for themselves. So take quality over reps any day.
Awesome. Okay. Finn's question. Do you have any drills that we can follow to improve our training?
Great question. So the Mantis X app has a bunch of drills in there that look at different dimensions of your shooting. So if you're using a Mantis system, just follow those drills, follow those courses, and you'll see lots of different ways. One thing that it pushes you on and that doesn't happen enough in the shooting community is we get really good at those, or we get better and we focus a lot on those long, slow shots. Like I just want to get bullseye shots every single time, right? And we don't think about in a real life scenario, we're popping off shots very, very quickly in a high stress environment. And so we want to make sure that not only are we going for accuracy, but more importantly, how does that change under speed? You might have great fundamentals in slow fire. When you start speeding it up, the fundamentals can fall apart. So practice pushing yourself. We really emphasize pushing yourself to the point of failure. So if you're having a nice tight group at the range, again, there's a drill in the Mantis X app that'll give you a cadence drill, or you can do part-time drills and just try to speed it up, go faster and faster until those groups start spreading a little bit. Because then okay, I need to focus more to bring those groups back in. But really adding layers of stress and time components are something that needs to happen more often. Being able to hit a target consistently, slow fire is great, but not really useful in practical situations.
Makes sense. Okay. Gabriella's question, what distances should I be training at? And is there a point to even train past 25 yards?
That is a great question. So it depends on what you're training for. Obviously, carbine training, rifle training, you're going to train at longer distances. Pistol training, most people that's what we're talking about. There's a lot of pistol training going on. You got to think about why you're training and what situations you might need to shoot, and you want to train for those distances. It is helpful, I would say, to do some longer range stuff just to get some context and to build that core muscle memory for accuracy. Because again, as you add stressors, that's accuracy is going to fall apart. So if you can hit stuff at distance, consistently holding your sights lined up through the trigger press at distance, then you'll be much more likely to do that at close range. A lot of people will shoot at 10 yards and have a nice group. But again, you had stressors and you could be missing pretty consistently. Now, having said that, I wouldn't dedicate the majority of your training to long, past 25 yards. I think most training, because most situations happen within 10 yards, that's what you need to be focused on. And again, you don't have to be, it's nice to have that really super tight group, but again, if it comes at the cost of speed, in a real life situation, accuracy is great. Close enough is great too. So we don't need to be so concerned with accuracy as we do with just effectiveness of getting a good enough shot off.
Great. Okay. Kim's question. Should I wear tactical or casual clothes when training, or does something that minimal have an impact on my training?
Great question. I think it goes back to the earlier question about what are you training for? So if you're training for competition, where you're going to wear something that's more tactical or tight fitting, train like that. If you're training for everyday carry, train in the casual clothes that you're going to be wearing on an everyday basis. So you want to get used to that environment that you anticipate wherever your goal is. Having said that, it's also good to mix it up a little bit, because you never know when you might need to use it in a different type of environment. So again, if you get too comfortable, too used to a certain type of clothing, then you get thrown for a loop under a different scenario. Like just try it all, mix it up. It also helps to make it a little bit more interesting and keep training engaging. We can get bored with training if we do it so regularly and so often. It's helpful to mix it up and throw in some different, situations that keep us engaged and interested in wanting to train. We have in the Mantis X app, we have some daily challenges that have different scenarios rather than just static target shooting, to kind of put you in a different mindset. That again, we're used to training a certain way for certain type of scenario, but there's really a broad spectrum of experiences we could have.
Right.
So throw yourself in some of those experiences and see what happens.
Great. All right, Shane's question. What are your thoughts on dry fire drills, and how often should I train? Weekly, daily, monthly?
Okay, I think if you've been a part of this at all, that is the holy grail. Dry fire is the holy grail. With feedback, like with the Mantis system, is even holier. So do it. Now the question is, how often? Again, what are your goals? What are you trying to achieve? If you're a competitive shooter, you're doing it every day. If you're someone who's looking to just carry, I don't want to say just, but someone who wants to maintain proficiency, what our data says is that if you practice twice a week for 10 minutes dry fire, you'll stay just as sharp as you need to be. Like, you will see no degradation in performance and proficiency. So it's not a big time commitment. We're talking, this is 10 minutes of focused dry fire twice a week. You might even be able to cut that down to once a week or 2 5-minute sessions, just keeping those muscles tuned and sharp and your brain focused. Once you've gotten up to a certain acceptable level of proficiency. Once you're there, maintaining it is easier. So just keep it sharp. Don't go months without doing it, or else you'll have to get back up that hill again. But it isn't a massive commitment. Don't be intimidated assuming that you got to train daily for extensive periods of time and spend a lot of money on ammo. You don't. As long as you're training those quality reps, you're good.
That's great points. Cindy's question. What's the best round to train with?
Live fire. I assume she's talking about live fire.
Yeah.
Best round to train with is the round that again, what's your objective? What's your purpose? What do you plan on carrying? What are you shooting? Is it, again, competition? Whatever round you're shooting competition, train with that round. If you're going to carry 9mm or 380 or 40 or 45, like, train with that round. Now, there's hollow point versus full metal jacket. What type of round do you want to train with? Hollow point's a lot more expensive than full metal jacket. It doesn't make that much of a difference. Obviously, the grains could be different between, but ultimately, you can train with cheaper ammo and save the expensive stuff for your actual circumstance. But again, whatever gun you plan to carry, train in that caliber.
Got it. Harvey's question. Should I focus on training indoors or outdoors?
Yes. So again, repeating the same mantra, what's your objective and where do you plan to be shooting more often? Train in that environment so your mind gets used to it, while also recognizing that you need to be prepared for any environment. So train in all environments, and it keeps it fresh, like the other things we talked about, keeps you engaged. And like you said, you can have beautiful experience at the range outdoors. You can have a very beautiful experience indoors. We support training in your home, in all rooms of your house. So you get in that mindset of, if I had to, what would I think like? What are the other things I need to consider in terms of where I'm aiming the gun, my positioning, all that other ancillary stuff beyond just trigger control and shooting mechanics. So train where you spend your time.
Great. So that's all of our pre-submitted questions, but I was just looking at the comment section of Facebook and YouTube. We had 2 additional questions, I think, come through. If you want to address those, and it's just all about Mantis, of course.
Yeah. So Kingdom Defense says, what's the difference between the X3 and the X10? So this is the X10 on here. The X3 is a similar form factor, small, compact, easy to put on there. It's the X3 sells for $170. The X10 is only $250. The capability differences are there's some different hardware in here, and then they have different software capability too. So the X3 works on pistols and rifles, works for dry fire and live fire and air guns, CO2, airsoft, whatever. The X10 does all that. In addition to that, the X10 works on shotguns. So for like trap, skeet, sporting clays, also for archery, if you're into that. And then there's some a little bit more dynamic shooting drills in the app itself. There's a holster draw analysis drill. So analyzes your holster draw. Typically it's from beat to bang. This breaks it down into 5 different segments of time that analyze how long it took you to get to grab the gun, to get it out of the holster, to get it presented, to get it on target and taking the shot. So 5 different segments of time. You can analyze your inconsistencies, areas of weakness, where you're slow, where you're fast. Also has a recoil meter, so it analyzes the recoil of the gun in 4 different dimensions. How much recoil there is, how quickly you get back on target, the recoil path, how the angle of the recoil. All of those things are diagnostic tools to help you figure out the ideal grip and stance to mitigate recoil in a multi-shot scenario. And then there's some other dynamic shooting drills as well. And then it also the X10 comes with a couple adapters, one for long guns that don't have a rail adapter, it's a barrel clamp adapter, and then one universal mag rail that you can stick down here as well. So additional adapters, additional capabilities, and works on shotguns and bows. That's what the X10 does in addition to everything the X3 does.
Thought of everything. That sounds great.
Well, again, we built it for ourselves and then, take it to the world. Other questions. 30 cal crazy. Is the scoring different between short and long guns in Mantis? By short and long, I assume you mean pistol and rifle. And the answer is yes. So typically with rifle, you're shooting at longer distances. And so the scoring system is more sensitive. So if you're going to get like a 90 5-on-1, it's going to be like the equivalent of a 90 on the other. So you just got to dial it in a lot tighter to have greater accuracy at further distances with a rifle. And I do want to make one comment. There's a Krista Ron says, we love Mantis here at Parris Island. So Parris Island is a Marine Corps recruiting depot. So basic training happens there, and all new recruits that go through Parris Island, which is about half the Marine Corps, they use Mantis as part of their basic training.
Wow, that's awesome.
You can have confidence that the gear we make is used by those that serve us. And we're trying to keep them safe, bring them home through their good discipline and safety and firearm proficiency.
Thank you. That's great, though. I think I just saw 2 more comments come through. Just the last one. I have a Strikeman system. How does Mantis differ?
Yeah, so Strikeman is a laser training system. So, which is you put a laser cartridge in. The Mantis X is the one that gives you analytics and diagnostics, pairs it with an app. Strikeman is a laser cartridge you put into the app, and then you put it into your gun, and then has an app that uses the camera to identify shots on target. So we have a Mantis system, not the X system, but it's called Mantis Laser Academy. That's a similar construct to Strikeman. So laser cartridge, an app-based system, looks at targets. Our system is so those systems are similar in concept. I'm not going to talk good, bad. Just try them both out. Apps are free. If you have a laser cartridge, you can try them both out, see what works better for you. We have personal favorites, obviously, but the Mantis X system is a different construct completely. It analyzes your technique. So what we say is like Mantis Laser Academy, it looks at where you hit, and Mantis X tells you the whole story. So it's kind of like the last page of a book is where you hit. We tell you why you missed or why you hit, and if you missed, here's how you can correct it. So there's no other analytical diagnostic tool on the market that gives you that level of feedback that looks backward at the shooter and says, what was the shooter doing during the shot process?
Right.
The bullet would have gone, dry fire, but what did the shooter do to influence that bullet trajectory?
Makes sense. Well, I think that's all the comments that are coming through. We went through all the pre-submitted ones. I don't see any other ones coming through the comments. You've addressed all of them very well. I think that's going to conclude this webinar. Do you have any last minute tips or anything you want us to know about before I send us out?
Great question. So I think I've beat some dead horses, but be safe, be trained, be responsible, and that's how we maintain our rights. And certainly, we're all in this together. Be supportive. Don't be critical of others that are trying to find their way along this path. Gentle reminders towards safety, gentle reminders about how to train properly. Help each other out. Be part of the community. Be a positive voice and a positive force for good. And we'll keep moving forward.
I love it. It's great. Well, if any of our viewers do have any other additional questions, you can email us at marketing@firearmslegal.com. And thank you again, Austin, for joining us for tonight's webinar and sharing your knowledge over this topic. It's been a really pleasure having you on. But remember, all of our viewers, to click the links in the caption below to get protected at a discounted rate, and to also let us know what you would like to see in our future webinars. And if you enjoy content like this, then make sure to like our Facebook page if you're watching from there, or hit the subscribe button below on that little bell, also on YouTube, so you can get notifications whenever we do go live for webinars like this in the future. But if you are a member with FLP, you can get a discount on Mantis products that Austin was talking about today. So just check out your member portal for the discount code if you would like to purchase, which is a great purchase. So I need to do it soon. But
we don't offer discounts. Like everything we do is always sold. Like we don't play the discount game or the coupon game. We just partner with a few organizations that we feel like are doing great work to further our Second Amendment rights and doing it the right way. And so it's exclusive discount just for you guys, and take advantage of it. Get trained.
Yep. I was super excited whenever, because I was part of the conversations to have that little partnership happen. I was just like, we got them on our team with us. And it's just great to be able to offer our members a discount on y'all's products. So then we can like show them like, hey, you need to check them out, and they can just get the product, and they're more inclined getting it, especially with like everything now. They're like, well, everything's so expensive. But then if they see even the smallest discount or the biggest discount, they're like more inclined to get it. It's just something simple. And it's great that we have you guys as a partner there. So that's awesome. But we hope you all have a great rest of your night. And remember to protect yourself, and we'll protect you. Night, everyone.